Hey everyone, really excited to see you here again on Mixer. We're doing our final part in our four-part session on developing JavaScript applications with the Microsoft Identity Platform. As part of our Mixer farewell tour, we want to give you an explosive set of demos to close things out. And so today we're going to focus on talking about the Microsoft Graph SDK for JavaScript. At the very end, once we do that, we'll also look at a really cool, quick demo that I saw somebody do, and I thought I have to share it before we go. And that's how to use our authentication token to connect to other services in Azure. So, got a lot of stuff planned for you today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get started, I always like to do a little bit of housekeeping. The first thing, just want to let you know that, again, I'm Sydney Andrews. I'm an Azure MVP, Microsoft Certified Trainer. I feel like I've been your guide throughout this entire series, even introducing you to great people like Beth Pan, who delivered our last session. Today, we have a special guest, Jason Johnston. He is a content developer with the Microsoft Graph Developer Experience team. He's going to show us how to use the Graph SDK from JavaScript, and I'm super excited to see it. A couple days before we get started, first off, if you got any questions, we are here live on the chat. We're going to try to answer your questions as best we can. If you're watching this in a recorded version or you come up with a question after the live event, msusdev@microsoft.com. That's the alias you should go to, and that's where we will be able to. Whoa, what happened? Yeah, that works. Yeah, my switches. Hey, can you hear me on the Teams call?
I can hear you on the Teams call.
Oh,
Yep, can hear you now.
this is terrifying. My switch just died. All right, I'm reconnected now. Do we want? Well, let's see. I'm going to reconnect this to Mixer and keep my fingers crossed nothing else happens. All right, everybody on the live stream. It looks like I got disconnected, but we're back. Just wanted to share with you that if you got any questions, you need some help with this series, you can always reach us at msusdev@microsoft.com. And all the presentations that we're showing are available for you online on GitHub. Now, before anything funny happens to my connection again, just want to go immediately into our agenda for today, and that's to actually have Jason show us how to use the Graph SDK for JavaScript. And then once Jason shows us that, I'll show you some cool things you can do with the authentication tokens you get from the Microsoft Identity Platform. So without further ado, Jason, I really like for you to show everybody how to get started with that Graph SDK for JavaScript. I myself know I'm really excited to see it.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Hello, guys. I'm gonna just go ahead and take over the Teams and share my screen here, and we'll get started. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to use the Microsoft Graph JavaScript client library. anyone's familiar with Microsoft Graph, you know it's a REST API, and you can always, of course, use basic JavaScript fetch APIs to invoke it if you want to. But we provide this client library, which gives you a lot of different benefits over just rolling those requests yourself. We implement like retry handlers for throttling and things like that. So there's a lot of good reasons to use it. I won't go into all of them. We'll just kind of dive into the how-to at this point. So this is the GitHub repository for the JavaScript client library, and it's got your basic information for getting started and installing it and all of that good stuff. The JavaScript client library is not tied to any specific framework or platform. You can use it in the browser, you can use it in Node.js, you can use it with React, Angular, whatever you particularly like to do with JavaScript. The demo I'm going to do today is browser-based, but just bear in mind you can use it in those other platforms as well. So if we scroll down a little bit here, it gives us an idea of how to install this via a script tag. Since we're doing this in a browser, we're going to use that particular method. So I'm going to switch to my test user here and give you an idea of what we're working with. So this is a basic JavaScript page, and I am starting from our JavaScript tutorial, which is on our documentation website. So anyone can go and start from scratch and build this same code that I'm about to show you guys. So what I've done is I've gone through this tutorial up through adding the authentication. So we're right at the point where we want to add the Graph SDK and start doing something with it. So switch over to the code. So we'll start looking at just the HTML page itself. I just want to point out that we've added the Graph SDK through a script tag, just like it tells us to do on GitHub. And right away, we've got the SDK available to us. So going back to the tutorial, the first thing that we need to do to use the SDK's client object is to implement an authentication provider. That sounds really complicated, but essentially what an authentication provider is a simple little class that provides an access token. The SDK implements a default authentication provider that is based on the MSAL.js library that the Microsoft Identity Platform provides. So it's real easy to integrate that if you're already using MSAL.js. So what I'm going to do is copy this code here, and then we'll add it into the code and we'll take a look at exactly what it's doing. Okay, so the first thing that we're doing is we're setting options to specify the permission scopes that our application needs. So in Microsoft Graph, everything is the access to every single API is controlled by permission scopes. And in this particular sample, we're going to be pulling data from the user's calendar. So we're adding calendars.read. And we're leaving user.read in there as well, just so that we can query the graph to get the user's username, email address, that sort of thing. So once we've created this options object, then we're creating the authentication provider itself. So the MSAL client is, again, a client that's provided by the MSAL.js library, and I have already set that up in a separate file, and we're not going to go into those details, but you can definitely follow along the tutorial if you want to find out more about that particular piece. Once we have the authentication provider created, then we're just creating a client object. So using this init with middleware, we pass in the authentication provider, and we've got a client that is ready to go. It's going to handle all of the token management and everything like that for us. So we can move on to actually making some graph calls. So following along in the tutorial, we're going to copy this getEvents function. And we'll add it into our file here. And let's take a look at what this is actually doing. So here's the actual call to the Microsoft Graph. So we're saying the API that we want to call is /me/events. And then we're using select and order by to sort of massage the results that we get back from that API. The .select method adds a select query parameter to the function. So by using that, I'm actually telling it which fields on events that I care about. And in the response, I'll only get back those particular fields. Then the order by is also similarly adding an order by query parameter and telling it this is how I'd like the results sorted. So the server will do the sort for us, and when it returns it back, this is how we'll get it back. Okay, and then once we And this is, instead of actually building any specific UI, I'm just going to throw this into a pre-formatted code block and just dump it out as JSON, just so that we can see that it's working. And finally, I'm going to add that method into my update page function. Okay, and with all those changes in place, we should be ready to go. I'm going to refresh the page. And if I click on the calendar, well, you can see that we're getting back JSON results for the events that I've asked for. So pretty easy, pretty simple to use. Now, one question that we get a lot with the SDK is how do I translate a particular graph request that I see in the documentation to JavaScript? So that's a really great question, and there's a couple of ways that you can do it. The first is if we look at the documentation, most places, let's just pick a user, list users, for example. So we see that it's just a get/users is the HTTP request. If we come down to the examples and we start looking at some of these examples, they default to showing you the HTTP, but we also have tabs for all our different SDKs. So you can flip over to the JavaScript and it's going to give you an idea of exactly how to call that using the JavaScript SDK. So those are great for the examples that we include in the documentation, but you may be doing something a little more complicated with your code. So another great resource is the Graph Explorer. Using the Graph Explorer, you can execute any kind of graph request that you want. You can even create custom requests. So for example, here's the built-in get my mail function, but I might want to add a select statement to just get back the subject and the body. Okay. If I look at the response, I see with just the subject and the body. Okay, well, for some reason, this isn't adding in my select statement, but it does give me, it should update. based on the query that we're running. So this will give you an idea if you're trying to build a particular query and you can get it to work in Graph Explorer. The Code Snippets tab in Graph Explorer will show you how to do that using one of our SDKs. So with that, that's about all that I have for you. Are there any questions?
So, Jason, I didn't see any questions in the chat yet. This demo is great. Really excited to see that we can use that Graph SDK to make it really easy to call the graph. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time. We sent people the link to docs.mixel.com to the tutorial on JavaScript. Any other places you recommend they go look for documentations or examples?
So everything graph related should be on the docsmicrosoft.com/graph site. So we've got a number of things here. So there's resources here where you can go and search for samples. It'll also link off to our SDKs. And there's lots of ways that you can filter by different platforms and different services that are in the graph to find a sample that might be relevant. So that's one place that you can go. There's a lot of other tutorials besides just the JavaScript. So if you come and look, there's all sorts of different platforms, and we have some scenario-based tutorials as well on Microsoft Learn that will take you through implementing specific scenarios. Other than that, our GitHub is a great place to just start poking around. It's the Microsoft Graph GitHub organization, and you can find all sorts of samples here in all kinds of different languages. Some of them are actually created by some of the sub-teams. Like we have the Teams folks have created some team-specific samples. For example, the security API folks have created security-specific stuff. So there's a lot of samples and information available on GitHub.
Well, Jason, again, thanks for everything. I put all the links you just shared into the chat, so anybody who's looking at this as a recording or looking at it live, all the links are there available for you. Jason, again, thanks for everything you've shown us today.
Yeah, no problem.
So for everyone else still on, we have one more demo I wanted to show, and that will wrap things up today. And that's just really talking about more about what you can do once you have your authentication token. So Jason just showed you that once you have your authentication token, you could go in and you can connect to the graph, whether it's using the graph directly or using something such as the Graph SDK for JavaScript. I want to take it a step further. I'm going to show you how to take that authentication token, whether you got it from MSAL.js or got it manually, and use it to connect to a database in Azure. So what I did, and I'm going to refresh my Azure portal. I had it open a little bit too long. But I have a MySQL database here in Azure, and I created it in advance. I haven't done anything, just created it and gave it a unique name, MySQL Sid. I'm using my fictitious person that I've used for plenty of the other demos, Elton Dixon. And I'm going to go into this MySQL database, and I'm going to add Elton Dixon as an Active Directory admin. So edixon at connecte.co. Got to spell his name correctly. And then I'm going to select him and save that. Now that I have him saved as an Active Directory admin, I can actually log into this MySQL database using Elton's identity as opposed to a built-in username or password. Now, just like with any other type of database, I need to set it up so you can connect to it just for this demo today, and I'll delete this right after. I'm going to just lay any IP address connect. Just keep things super simple. Now, once everything's set up, I'm going to open up what's called the Azure Cloud Shell. That's shell.azure.com. And just like with everything else, I'm going to put that link in the chat. Now, Elton is a part of the connecte.co organization, but they don't have Azure. My company that I work for personally has an Azure subscription, so I shared it with Elton so he could connect to things. So I need to select that as my directory. And now I have access to all of this stuff. And so I can go in and type in AZ account show. And that's going to print out all the account information, such as username, tenant ID, this user specific ID, their home tenant, which is same as the current tenant. So this is the identity I want to use to get an access token. So how do I do that? Well, if you don't know how, you can always use your favorite search engine and search for AZ account. And it's going to take you to the Microsoft documentation for the AZ account command in the Azure CLI. And again, as we go, I'll always post the links in the chat. Now, I didn't even have to go very far. The second item on the list is, hey, here's how you can get access token. So I'm going to go AZ account, get access token. That's easy. AZ account, get access token. And sure enough, it gives me a bearer token. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And I wonder if it'll work with the graph. So I'm going to go open the tool that you've probably seen me use before, Postman. Going to go to HTTPS graph.microsoft.com. I'm going to go to version 1.0 endpoint and go to the me endpoint. And for authorization, I'm going to pass in a bearer token. I have an old one in here. I'll just pass in this new one and hit send. I need to set the audience for this token. So I haven't set the audience appropriately. Well, how do I do that? Well, through the help of documentation, I can find out that we can actually identify what we want to use this token with, set an audience using either the resource parameter or the resource type. So it's already given me an example, resource type MS graph. Let's give it a shot. Easy account, get access token, resource type MS graph. It gives me an access token. So if this is correct, I should just be able to go into Postman, go to my bearer token header, replace it, hit send, and have my profile information back. That was easy. Now, what if I wanted to specify it manually? Well, if we want to do it manually, we have to use resource instead of resource type. Now, we've done a couple of demos with the Graph API, so we remember that it starts with graph.microsoft.com. So if I put that in, I'll get a token. And if I typed everything correctly, it should be functionally equivalent to the token I just had. So if I delete that and paste in this new token, everything works just fine. I can even go in and see all the different audiences I have available by using a command called AZ Cloud Show. And just in case you didn't know where that is, I just go back to the documentation, go to Cloud Management, and there's AZ Cloud Show. And it shows me that, hey, it gets all the details of the currently registered cloud. Again, paste that link in the chat. Now, when I ran AZ Cloud Show, it shows all the different audiences or endpoints I can use and some of their suffixes. So we see for the graph, let's see, Microsoft Graph, it's graph.microsoft.com. But what's more interesting is that there's one for open source database, open source relational databases, OSS RDBMS. Well, I want to use that, so I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to do AZ account, get access token, resource, and paste that in. Hey, I got an access token that can connect to open source relational databases on Azure. Now, if we went back to AZ account, we'll see that we can use resource type and just put in OSS RDBMS and get the same thing. So AZ account, get access token, resource type, OSS RDBMS. And there we go. I have a token that I can use to connect to MySQL. I mean, let's try it out. So I'm going to copy this token. Actually, I'll copy it in a second. I'm first going to go to MySQL Workbench. You can use any type of MySQL tool, but I'm going to use MySQL Workbench because a lot of people who use MySQL already know this tool. I'm going to create a new connection. And let's see. I have an Azure database for MySQL server called MySQL Sid. So that's what I'm going to name my connection. For the host name, I'm going to go in and grab my server name from Azure. That's mysqlsid.mysql.database.azure.com. Paste that in. Now the username gets funny because normally you would just use like a built-in user, But since we're using AD off here, I can say edixon at connect.e.co and then put that at MySQL SID. Now, before I try anything, I need to go in and enable clear text authentication so I can provide a password. Hit test connection, jump back in here and grab my token, copy my token, paste that in as the password. I'm not going to save it in the vault. Hit OK, and I'm connected to the MySQL database. So pretty cool stuff. And somebody in the chat is actually talking about how you can parse this token to find different metadata. Yeah, it's really cool what you can do. And I'm using edixon's AD authentication, and I'm connected via MySQL Workbench. You notice in this demo, I never showed you what the real username and admin password was for this database because I don't care. I'm not going to use it at all. So I'm going to create a database. I'm going to call it DemoDB. And close the SQL or hide the SQL additions page. So I'll create a database called DemoDB. Execute that command. I'm going to refresh my navigator. I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to call this table items. I'm being purposefully simple here. So within this table called items, and I might have to resize some stuff. This is what happens when you try to do everything. Let's see. Let's see, view, panels, hide output area. I'll just do that temporarily. So I'll create a column name ID of type int and a column name of type varchar. Nothing super complex. Hit apply. It's going to create a table. Nothing crazy here yet. I can execute SQL statements. So go back, insert into demodb.items values 1, and then for the name I'll put in Sydney. Insert into demodb.items values 2, and then put in Andrews. Put a semicolon. Execute both, and of course it's not showing the output pane, but let's do it. Select all from demodb.items. Execute the query. And we have our 2 records in database. So I'm able to manage this database using AD authentication using that token. But we can do other stuff here. So just jumping in back into the Cloud Shell. We know that we got this great command, AZ account get access token resource type OSS RDBMS. And we get an access token for that. So just a little bit of shell scripting here. I can just save it in a variable called token. AZ account get access token resource type OSS RDBMS. Now I can echo the value of that variable. All right. But the problem here is it's giving me the whole JSON file. Well, that's no good. So let's parse this. So we know if we run this command, it gives us a JSON file. Well, you know what? I just want the access token. So I'm going to query just for the access token. It gives me the access token, but it puts semicolons around. Maybe because technically the output is still JSON. So let me switch the output to maybe tab separated values. That'll get rid of the quotes. There we go. So now, same command, token equals $, run that command. Gonna echo token. All right, we have token stored in a variable. We're ready to cook. So this is gonna look very similar, but Cloud Shell has the MySQL client installed. So MySQL host. Now it's MySQL sid.mysql.database.azure.com. Gonna enable clear text plugin. My username is gonna be edixon at connect.e.co. Add MySQL sid. And then my password, let's just go ahead and pass in that token. If I did it all correctly, let's see. I misspelled password. How do you misspell password? I don't know, but I did it. So I did it, I think, correctly. I'm here, I'm connected. So if I just call use DemoDB, select all from items, I'm able to query. So I just wanted to show that demo towards the end. I know it's only like 5 or 10 minutes, but just to show you that once you have these access tokens, you kind of open up a whole new world of possibility of the things you can do and how you can authenticate the different services. Now, I did all of this manually, but you could definitely build applications that does this. So, for example, in my day-to-day job, I do more .NET development than I do JavaScript. So I do some very similar things with tools like Entity Framework. And when I'm doing JavaScript work or I'm doing work in PHP, then I'm using different ORMs and different tools, but the workflow is still the same. So just to wrap things up today, wanted to remind everyone that, hey, we're really excited to learn about your experiences trying out the different things as you learned in the 3 sessions. The first session where I went in and showed you how to use MSAL.js to get that authentication token and how to get very comfortable with the platform and understand what everything does manually before we went on to use the automated tools. Then we had Beth's session where she went very deeply into the Graph toolkit with some really exciting demos and examples. And then today, Jason and myself, we both showed you some of the stuff you can do. Once you get past the authentication step and you get those tokens, this type of cool stuff you can do. So as with everything else, our presentations are available online, github.com, MSUSDev, Microsoft Identity Platform Dev. And then if you got any questions, we're here in the chat. But any questions you feel like we missed, MSUSDev at Microsoft.com. I'm going to keep the broadcast going for another 5 or so minutes, just to because we have all both members of the team, Matt and Aisha, in chat answering questions. I believe I just saw Jason on chat again answering questions, and then I'll jump in the chat answering questions too. But this has been a really fun series. Really glad to show you some really cool tech stuff on Mixer. So again, we'll be in chat for another 5 or so minutes.